Just so you know, everything you hear in this track comes from my sample pack. So every drum samples, every chord stacks, every pad, you can find these samples in my free sample pack Monad. I'll put a link in the description in case you're interested in getting one. The first thing you'll notice is that for most of the tracks in this project, there are just audio tracks. This is because to create these ambiances and pads, it requires tons of resampling. So in this video, I can't really go too in-depth into the sound design aspect of it, but I'll try to deconstruct everything as detailed as possible. I'll also show you some of the tricks to kind of make the most out of my Monad sample pack by manipulating some of the samples to make it sound more interesting, by layering some of the samples together. And I think these tricks would be really useful as well because it's mostly transferable to other sample packs. Oftentimes when we listen to emotional future bass, you'll find these ambient sections in between drops. They often sound really calming, peaceful, emotional, and they usually don't have drums on it. So how do you keep things interesting and not repetitive? So the easy way is to simply introduce new elements every 4 to 8 bars. And in this case is by layering. So as you can see, by using this as example, I'm layering the improv pad on top of the spaced echo pad. There are a few principles when it comes to layering pads. The most important one is to pay attention to the notes that they are covering. So for example, for the spaced echo pad, it's sort of covering these notes. But for the improv pad, it's more like covering the upper octave of it. So basically they are covering different octaves. By doing so, you'll be making sure that they won't be clashing with one another because they aren't occupying the same note range. So another trick to make these ambient sections sound more interesting is to simply bounce multiple tracks into one and further process it. So if you look at these 3 tracks here, I actually bounced them into one single track. Added some mid-side OTT, camel crusher, and some EQ. It sounds more crushed, gives it more high end, and it has more distortion to it. Eventually, there are still the same samples, but they're simply processed in a different way, so they still sound coherent. The same principle applies to the thick pad as well, except I went way crazier with that because it was like 9 to 10 tracks together. But as long as you're willing to experiment with those tricks I just covered, you'll get some similar results. So the thick pad sounds something like this. The thick pad that I just talked about is actually one of the main layers in my chord stack. So if you listen to it in solo, you can sort of hear it at the back. And the only thing I did here was actually adding a supersaw layer, a white noise layer, a bass layer, and I duplicate that thick pad, but I transpose it up an octave, so it covers more of the frequency range. In this other video of mine, I actually mentioned this sort of chord stack layering method in a much more detailed way, so you can go check that out after watching this video. But basically, that's just how a layer sounds in an emotional future bass track. It's actually much more simple than you think. Another way to make these ambient sections sound more interesting is to add what I call focal sweeps. So in this monad sample pack, you can find 3 vocal sweeps. And here I used the second one, which sounds something like this. It sort of comes and goes, so it kind of gives these sections more movement to the track without any use of like percussive elements. And in this case, I actually did a duplicate of that and pitched it up 7 semitones, so it kind of forms a chord. But yeah, these are some of the ways that you can use the vocal sweeps in my sample pack. One really quick tip here, just in case some of you guys don't know about reverse kick. Creating a reverse kick, you gotta cut out the transient part of it because it often sounds really disgusting. By doing so, you can achieve something like this. It sort of gives the first kick more impact, so it makes the whole drop sound more impactful. Now that I've gone over how I use these pad sounds and the vocal sweeps, you can kind of see the entire section, the entire structure for the intro is actually pretty simple. Basically, you have these pads and vocal sweeps lying around. But other than that, it's just some melodic elements like these to keep things interesting. Some transitional elements like impact sounds, reverse cymbal sounds, some white noise risers, and some exhaust, which sounds something like this. But other than that, it's just a sub bass layer and the build up kick that I've added at the final 8 bars. This one is actually the one that I usually go for most of my tracks. So if I turn off the effects right now, you can hear that it's just a basic sine wave. And if you're not on headphones, you can sort of notice that you can't really hear the frequencies. If you pay really close attention, you might be able to, but in most cases you can't. So in order to allow you guys to hear the sub bass as well, my usual approach is to add distortion and saturation. This creates upper harmonics. So if you listen to the sub bass right now, but to dial things back a little, I usually add a low pass filter at the end of my effect chain, because the purpose of having a sub bass is to provide a really solid low end. It shouldn't really be the focus of the entire section. So sections like these ambient sections, you should be focusing on like the melodies, the beautiful pads, ambiences, but not the sub bass. So if you listen to it right now, and for the drop, you can sort of hear these glitched elements. And this one. You might be wondering how I made them, but it's actually really simple. You basically resample your whole chord stacks and you simply pitch it up. So if you listen to it in solo, it's just the chord stacks pitched up an octave. So it's nothing complicated. I mean, everyone can do this. The same goes with this one. I simply chopped it up and rearranged some of the stuff so it sounds more glitchy. This glitch sound is also the one you find in the pack. I simply chopped it up and sort of rearranged it a little bit. So by simply rearranging these samples, you can create different variations already. So for the melody in the drop, it sounds something like this. And if you remove all these effects, you know that it's just a piano sound. And this one specifically, it's actually an early version of my Jonathan's upright felt sample library. So I basically started off with some basic processing just for my piano, just to make it sound more compressed, more refined. So next is my bit crushing. So Redux is the bit crusher in Ableton, and I use the LFO to control the sample rate of my bit crusher. So it has more movement to it, more variations. So it sounds something like this right now. Then I got some reverb and camel crusher to create this really distorted reverb tail. Because without the reverb, it's just different if you listen to it. And creates this really weird stereo effect. I don't really know how that works exactly, but that's how I make this sound. Next is my little auto boy by pitching it up an octave. Please don't ask me why I put an auto boy on the piano, but it all comes down to experimentation. Next is an auto pan. It kind of fucks with your ears a little bit. Then it's just some reverb to make everything sound more spacious. And the same trick, like this reverb distortion trick. But that's just it. Like, these automations are simply to cut out the reverb tails in these gaps to create space for other elements to work. So for most of the samples in my sample pack, they are sort of, you just gotta drag and drop and it's ready to go. But it's also your choice if you want to further process it, kind of like what I'm doing with the tape kick 1 here. So if you listen to the kick without any sort of further processing, in context, it sounds something like this. It sounds boxy, it doesn't punch through. So here I did some transient shaping to sort of boost the transient a little bit. Did some EQing just to make it sound brighter, more high-end-ish, and some soft clipping. So if you listen to it right now, it just sounds miles better because it hits harder. And yeah, that's basically how I made this entire track. And as a bonus, I'll be giving out these 2 samples that I made at the very last minute. So one of them being this bonus pad sound. And the other one being this heavy impact sound. I'll put the download link in the description of this video. And if you're interested in getting the entire pack, the entire Monad pack, it's actually free. I'll put a download link to that as well. But other than that, I hope you found this tutorial helpful. And if you did, be sure to give me a thumbs up, subscribe, turn on the bell and everything. Just the usual stuff. Also comment down below on what you want to learn next, because I'd love to do more tutorials in the future. But I'm not sure what topic I should be covering, because, you know, most of the stuff you can already find it on YouTube and on the internet. So let me know what you want to learn specifically. I'll try to cover as many of those as possible. But yeah, I guess I'll talk to you guys next time.